Uh, um,
Where are you at an archive or a museum, Christopher?
I'm at the Missouri Historical Society.
Oh, excellent. Oh, okay.
I do think we should do introductions because I'm curious about you four. We just introduced ourselves to Hannah, but yeah, if we could do some introductions, that would be great.
Yeah, okay, terrific.
Chris, why don't you start it off?
Okay. Hello. I'm Chris Impastato, and I'm at St. Louis Public Library. I'm down at Central Library, which is our large Carnegie Library downtown at 14th and Olive. Before I came to the Fine Arts Room, I worked in rare books and manuscripts, taking care of the media archives. And now I'm down in Fine Arts. I also handle the Steedman Architectural Collection, which is a wonderful architectural library we have here, special library. So I'm the Fine Arts Librarian, working on Missouri Remembers. And then we also have the St. Louis Artist Files. We have around 3,000 of them here that we've been collecting and adding to since the beginning of time. So that's where I am. That's who I am. So let me know if you have any questions.
Kristin?
Hi, I'm Kristin Hartman. I work at the Nelson-Atkins Museum of Art in Kansas City, Missouri. I work in the archives. I'm the archives assistant. I've been there for about 2 years. I went to graduate school for library science and did a practicum with the senior archivist at the end of that, and then ended up working there. So mostly what I do is I'm working on implementing archive space right now for our collections. I work on research requests. I do a lot of processing of collections, and then I'm doing Missouri Remembers as well as a researcher. So it's nice to meet all of you.
Thank you. That sounds like a lot of fun. I have an R. Wagener. Are you Roberta?
Yeah, that's me. I'm Roberta Wagener. I also work at the library at the Nelson-Atkins Museum, and my main job is reference and interlibrary loan. So I do like requests and help people with their research. And I also do circulation and access services here. And I'm also a researcher for Missouri Remembers. So I've researched artists and I've researched some of the artist associations as well for the database.
Fantastic. And I think last of the project team is going to be Lora. Is that right?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Actually, this is really great because we've worked with Kristin for a while, but I hadn't gotten your background. And so that's fantastic to actually get that introduction. So my name is Lora Farrell, and I'm the Digital Services Librarian with the Kansas City Art Institute. Our library is called Janus Library, and we have been a partner on the Missouri Remembers project since the beginning, and we just feel kind of honored to have been asked to be a participant in this project. So technically, I'm a site supervisor, and then I have a research intern who was funded through the grant that they were awarded through the National Endowment for the Humanities.
Okay. So we have three attendees, really. Hannah, you want to briefly introduce yourself?
Hi, my name's Hannah Trigg. I'm a student from Northwest Missouri State University, and I'm actually super excited to hear a lot more about the artist project as well. So I'm just sitting in, and I'll probably have some questions at the end for you.
All right, Christopher Gordon.
So yeah, I'm Christopher Gordon. I'm Director of Library and Archives at the Missouri Historical Society. I'm also Vice President of the Missouri Association for Museums and Archives. It's great to see you all here today. Like I said, I really enjoyed watching the video. Here at MHS, we have a pretty good art collection as well, and we have like Amy Schweig's and Thellingers and things like that. And I learned a lot because about the People's Art Center and some of those other early organizations that I really didn't know that many details about, but it was really fascinating to hear about people like Aaron Douglas and so forth too. People I had no idea, and the folk artist from Fulton, who apparently has really made a name for himself as a folk artist. I had I'd never heard of him either, but that was, yeah, it was really well done.
Thank you. It was great for us to do it. And honestly, when we participated, I had also, whenever I watched someone else's part of the presentation, I learned so much too. Like all of the St. Louis artists, you'd think that being here in the same state, we would know a little bit more, but I'm on the Kansas City side, so I'm on the western side of the state. And so learning about St. Louis, it just really made me want to reach in and learn so much more about the city and the surrounding area.
So how long did it take to put all of this together? When did you guys start?
Well, I can jump in and answer that. Anyone else is welcome to jump in and answer it too. Amelia Nelson at the Nelson, she tapped us for the project, I want to say 2 or 3 years ago in the very early part of the project. I don't have like the earliest email, just to see if we were interested. And then she applied for a Missouri Humanities Council grant for the early component of the project, and she was actually awarded that. At that time, we were having meetings every once in a while and we all had to, our organizations had to apply and make sure that we had a nonprofit account number. So that was several years ago. That was the early stages so that Amelia could apply for the National Endowment for the Humanities grant that she was successfully awarded in order to actually have a company create the portal and have us hire research interns for it. So we hired the research interns in August of 2020. So yeah, so that's really when it sort of started to take off and we began all of the research and began actually populating and creating the portal. So it's been a little over a year for the actual productivity.
So I have to ask, because we just finished a session on how COVID impacted the student experience during the past year or two. So did COVID and the restrictions in place have an impact on the project itself? Or were you able, if you hired all these researchers, Chris is waving her hand, I guess you have a few things to say.
Well, yes. And I'll just let you know that, so the project started over here with SLPL being involved in 2018, and it was the fine arts librarian that preceded me, Susie Frechette. And then also we have an outstanding local history librarian, Adele Hegney. She's a great colleague of mine, and so she's on the project too. So luckily they were on the project. Susie retired, I came in, and then all of a sudden COVID hits and we're selecting artists from home. My artist files are here. I can't check to see, I had a cursory list, but I didn't have, it's so hard to select materials without actually, seeing the depth and the breadth of the holdings, all the ephemera and all the clippings and everything else that's in each folder. So that was a handicap for me on my end, just starting in the position. And then while I've been a docent at the St. Louis Art Museum and the Mercantile, I know Missouri artists, but I wanted to make sure we were really trying to represent everyone in our state, not just the popular folks that have been mentioned all the time. We want to try to research, we want to give a broader sense of who was creating art in Missouri. So yes, it was hard during COVID because I initially selected from home. So it's catching up with me a little bit now.
And was there a target number that you guys were going after in terms of who you were going to represent?
Was that initial? Sorry.
No, go ahead. We had a goal. We wanted to have at least 300 done by this August, but then we saw the pace of the reality, and our interns worked 10 hours a week. So to try to have submitted 300 artists, but all of that, so we ended up having about 150 by August of 2021. With that in mind, you have to start somewhere. We are aware that there are so many more artists in Missouri through 1951. So this is just the beginning of the project, but that was our first year goal.
150 seems pretty ambitious to me. That's a lot of digging and a lot of work on in that amount of time.
How many interns did you have? How many people, I guess, I'm curious about the size of the project. How many people did you have working on this?
Well, there are 3 sites. So there's the Nelson-Atkins, and then there is St. Louis Public Libraries, and then there's Kansas City Art Institute. And the Art Institute, we had 1 research intern, and then I was the site supervisor. St. Louis, I'll let you answer that, Chris. And then the Nelson's been kind of a different animal.
I had 1 intern here, I'm the site supervisor, and then I have a practicum student who's working on his MLS. And so he's putting 100 hours towards the project. And now I just have another person that came forward who wants to be a volunteer. So it's drawing people in. So that's good news.
Roberta, is it just you and I at the Nelson-Atkins, and then it's Amanda as this, like the site supervisor there, I guess, and then we are getting an intern, is that correct? Soon?
I'm not really sure about that. I know me and you were the researchers, and Amanda is a site supervisor, and she also does the database. So she's the database administrator. And then Amelia, she sometimes does research too, but she's like the project administrator. So, yeah.
And we did formerly have others working on, like Tracy and Miranda, but they left the museum, so unfortunately, so.
So
I remember,
really, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to ask, because I remember watching the very end of this video, and I think this was pre-recorded, so I'm not sure if you guys have actually launched the site yet, but one of the things you were excited about was community involvement. So, you know, to kind of, I remember Amelia mentioning something to the effect of, you know, helping spread the word so that people who are aware of other artists can make you guys aware of them so that they can be included in the project. Have you seen a lot of that lately, or is that still kind of developing? I mean, Chris, you mentioned that it's kind of spreading and you're getting more people who are interested in being part of the project.
We are tracking the analytics of the visitors for the site. We're seeing a great increase. We've launched on September 20th. I just put the link also in the chat. And so we're just, I think, and also Nelson-Atkins folks can speak to this, but we also have a teacher's resource guide that's available too, which has been quite helpful. I don't know how much traffic that's getting, but we tried to create a very comprehensive product to launch with.
Thanks for including that link, Chris. And then I put the about link on it because it has the about section of the website. So the portal is launched. And then there's an opportunity in the about kind of FAQ where a reader or a user can click on it and then contribute an artist name or ask a question. So there is some information there where they have an opportunity. Right now, I'm not on the email list. I think Amelia and some of the directors are on the receiving email list for anytime someone contacts that. So I don't actually know right now if they've gotten a lot of people reaching out and submitting artist names that are from outside of the project. I don't know the answer to that. If you want, we could email you later and give you that information.
I was just curious.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Because I thought the community aspect of this was actually one of the more interesting aspects behind the project. So how you plan on involving the community in the future to help build it. But then honestly, Chris, I think this was something you targeted in on. So in one of my previous lives, I used to be president for the board of our local Kirksville Arts Association. And so the fact that you went back to community arts to find those artists back in the 30s and 40s and 50s was really surprising. I mean, it seems like a no-brainer now that I think about it, but can you talk maybe a little bit about what led you to those sites? That was a really interesting twist on the project.
You're asking about the People's Art Center?
Yes.
Yes, well, we could use a People's Art Center right now in St. Louis, but that's my side comment. But we've been using a lot of our archival collections, and they're housed up in our rare books and manuscripts collection up on the 3rd floor. And as we were digging around, basically we started out with Fred Alston, who taught at Sumner High School, art teacher. He was just outstanding. And he ended up volunteering later on in the 40s at the People's Art Center. So in research, as you know, you may start one place and then it leads you to another place. And then all of a sudden things are opening up. And I use People's Art Center because it explored St. Louis as a whole. And it and also on a side note, we have a customer here who actually was a student at the People's Art Center in the late 1950s. And his memories, he's Jewish, raised in University City, and his parents got him involved in People's Art Center to take art classes. And his memory of this experience is a very warm, wonderful memory of being embraced with art and connecting with people in the area. So we just really tried to use our existing archival collections and our clipping collections. Also, my intern spoke about the Vanguard galleries, which are here in the 1930s, trying to bring to light some other things. We have a number of prominent arts organizations in St. Louis. Some are here still, some are not, but you're trying to just dig up and share and plant the seed for other folks who are out there, because they may be sitting on a treasure trove of archival holdings or letters or something. And you just want to try to build and bridge connection.
I was just going to mention too that we also had the Wiki Editathon program associated with it too. So that was a little bit kind of bringing in community too, inviting people to assist in making edits to existing artists' records on Wikipedia, and also adding if they had more Wikipedia experience. But we did see some folks that were just from around, chip in to help with that. So that was pretty fun.
What's your distribution look like across the state in terms of what's been contributed, or are there pockets where you have very little, and are there ways that can be remedied, I guess?
If I could share my screen, we do have a map on the homepage of the portal, and it sort of shows the distribution. It has the state kind of divided into 5 or 6 chunks, and it shows the distribution. I'm going to try to share my screen. I don't know if that's possible on this type of Zoom.
It should be.
Okay, let's see here.
There you go.
Are you able to see this map here on the left?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's clearly kind of near the Kansas City area. There are 98 artists active, and then over there on the east side of the city, we've got 66 noted. And then we did try to branch out. It's definitely, this is the first year, and so our distribution ended up being concentrated right now on the areas where the organizations that were contributing existed. So I could click on like this northeast section here for these artists active, and there were 6 artists, and here we have their names. So you can see who these artists were, and then I'll click on Beryl May Triplet. So we did definitely try to cover the whole state. I don't know what you can see and what you can't. But there are more concentrations right now on those areas where the researchers specifically were already at. And we would love more information from any artists in the Ozarks and other areas where there may have been art associations. I know Amelia, I don't remember the story of how she got in touch with Sam Blaine, but Sam Blaine is a man that lives within an hour of Kansas City, and he happens to be an historian, and he had notebooks, maybe 8 or 9 notebooks full of lists of artists in Missouri where he'd handwritten their information. And he lent these notebooks to Amelia, and she began a scanning project where she had people scanning in each page. And then we were trying to add these artists that he had information on. So I'm not sure how she got connected to that particular man, but she has been working with people who happen to be interested in this information, and they have records that she's trying to get scans of so that we can include all of this information in the project. So that is an ongoing thing. I don't know if they're even done with the scanning because he had so many pages of artist information.
I think we're finished with the scanning. I know that me and Kristen were actually actively researching the artists included in his notebooks. Some of them you find a lot of information, and some of them it's a little difficult. Yeah, we're researching them.
Exactly. Yeah, those have been fun because, yeah, like Roberta said, some of them, it's just, you spend a few hours on it and there's not a whole lot. Just, I found that like just looking for like newspaper articles has helped a lot with those. And a couple of them I've found a ton, and it's been pretty exciting, excuse me. So that's been really fun to work on that, actually.
Do you remember how she got in touch with Sam Blaine in the first place? Did he reach out to her, or did he? I don't remember. She told us.
I don't remember that part of the story. I don't know if I can't remember how that happened. I'm sorry.
Have all these artists been publicly, have they been in exhibits or galleries, or some of these strictly, they're just known artists in their area, but they haven't been exhibited?
That answer is all over the map. I used some Art Institute resources that have lists of early students and early faculty. And so I assumed if they were like faculty in ceramics, that they were also an artist. And so there was a particular woman named Harriet Wisely that I researched, and I didn't find her in any exhibitions, but I did find out that she later, after she left the Art Institute, she earned a PhD from Rutgers and actually worked on ceramic components for airplanes. Wow. And she published papers on ceramic glaze and formula. And so she's in the portal, and I mean, I'm connecting her as an artist because she was a ceramicist and she was on the faculty here, but it's all over the map. And then I'll add with Aaron Douglas, he was in Kansas City as an artist in the 1920s, but he wasn't in any of the major exhibitions. And you can guess why that was, because he was African-American. And so he definitely was in many, many exhibitions later when he left the area. But it's really, in my experience, has been kind of all over the map. They weren't necessarily, there's not always a lot of documentation and career trajectories went in many different directions.
One of the artists I'm working on researching right now is in the Sam Blaine binder. Her name was Sarah Cora Gladish. She's actually more well known as being someone who writes music. She had a lot of music published. And I actually was able to they had some materials on her at the Historical Society in Columbia, and I was actually able to get them sent here to Kansas City, and I went and looked at them last week, and some of her Lora paintings and illustrations were actually in the records. And in my heart, I was just like, oh, this is so incredible, because that's online. And I got pictures with my phone of these little watercolor scenes that she did. And I'm going to go ahead and give them so she can hopefully put those on her record once I'm done researching her. And that just made me so happy to be able to, contribute that, just because there's none of that is online. It's mostly about the music she composed. So.
That's pretty fantastic.
Yeah, that's cool.
An exciting time.
We also the Central Library partnered years ago in the 1930s with the Urban League of St. Louis, and had a number of exhibits that were held right here in the art room, which is fine arts. And so, the Urban League doesn't do that any longer. We don't have that partnership. So I'd love to reestablish some of these partnerships, but it's bringing these partnerships from the past to light now, and letting folks know that this existed and how vibrant all these communities were. And they still are.
I was a little taken, and I was wondering, I'll test your art history knowledge here. We talk a lot about the development of the arts and crafts movement, and particularly coming into the Roycroft colony. And I know during that time frame in America, there were a lot of artist colony, and you guys alluded to that in your video. Can you speak to some of these artist colonies in Missouri? I'm just not aware of them as much as maybe you are.
I did some research on the Ozarks art colony, and it turns out there's a couple of iterations of that. There was one that was founded by Carl R. Kraft in like 1930 1910 or 1912. And then there was a later one by an artist named Dawson Watson. And he was later in the 1910s in the Ozarks. And they were in slightly different areas of southern Missouri. Like Dawson Watson was like near West Plains. And I think Kraft, it's been a while since I looked at that. I think he was further east in the Ozarks. And what I thought was interesting about the artists is that they would have this artist colony, but they didn't live there. Like Dawson Watson lived in St. Louis, Kraft came from Chicago. So I thought that was interesting that then in the 1910s, they were interested in the area as like, for landscape and things like that. So, because I know now when a lot of us think of the Ozarks, we think of like vacation, like Lake of the Ozarks and stuff like that. So I thought that was interesting that then it was like a landscape. And yeah, so that was the only one I researched that I know for sure was here in Missouri.
I think it's interesting they didn't live together, because so many of the ones I'm familiar with, that was their goal, was to create kind of a community living style that was centered around a particular artist initiative, I guess. You saw a lot of them on the East Coast. The one that I think it was around the same time frame was the North Street Bennett School, which is still there. It's a major art school right now in terms of some fine art, more craft design, like bookbinding and things like that. But when it was first developed as a colony, it was intended to actually support women and immigrants, particularly during that time frame. So I don't know if there was any kind of economic purpose behind any of the art colonies in Missouri or not.
Should have reviewed this. I'm not really sure. I know the one that was near West Plains that was specifically for women artists, or like the articles in the newspaper in West Plains mentioned these women artists were going to come in and participate in the art colony. And but Carl Kraft, I'm not sure. I think his was a group of like of artists who got together to paint in the Ozarks. But I can't remember if he had any specific people in mind. And Dawson Watson, I forgot. He did have a cabin near his art colony, and he would live there in the summer. And then the cabin caught on fire and was damaged, and so that's when it kind of ended, because he didn't have a place to stay in the summer anymore. So I thought that was an interesting story.
Was the St. Genevieve School, was that an actual colony?
That I researched, and I was trying to look her up really quick. She was the artist that I researched, and I can't remember her name, but she was a nun that actually taught there, and contributed art there as well. And I do believe that most of the people lived there like in the summer, if I remember correctly, like kind of gathered in the summers. She didn't live there, she just taught there. But I need to look into it more, because this is bringing this back. And like I said, she was one of the first that I researched. But yeah, it did seem like they had living spaces and gallery spaces. At St. Genevieve.
And I think, didn't Pollock, didn't he actually visit or work there briefly? I think I've read that before.
Who did you say?
Pollock, Jackson Pollock.
I think he may have. I mean, it was, let me see. I mean, I have to revisit the St. Genevieve Art Colony too, but it was the 30s and the early 40s, if I'm remembering correctly. So it's a prime time. I'm trying to think of the different, I don't know all the artists. I need a refresher on it, but if you get a chance to go down to St. Genevieve, it's wonderful to go down there. And there are also several publications. There's several publications on the history of the St. Genevieve Art Colony.
I have here that Thomas Hart Benton was there, and then it was Sister Cassiana was the name of the artist that I researched, and her nephew was a painter as well, Matthew Ziegler, and he was there as well. But it was a lot, it was quite a bit of famous artists there, I believe, from what I remember.
Does anybody know if anything exists from that colony that's still in St. Genevieve?
Yeah. Yes. If you go to the well, now there's a national park historic site there, but you can go to St. Genevieve, and I've done this. It's been about 10 years or so, But they have a wonderful area with a small exhibition space, some artwork, just telling the history and the story, trying to keep this narrative alive of this special art colony. So yes,
Yeah.
I highly recommend going there for the architecture and art.
Good idea. I think I have to do that.
Yeah, actually, I was just there last week. It's incredible just how much it's changed in the last, well, it's been a year since I've been there. But I went to the French Colonial Institute there and saw that building and all the restoration work that they've done. It really is impressive. And it's great that the Park Service is there now too.
Cool.
The other thing I just wanted to mention is that through our research, and I'm sure I know my friends in Kansas City are finding the same, but how invested our Missouri artists were in the world and in the nation. And for art colonies, they were really involved with Gloucester. They were involved in Provincetown. They were all around. So they were around the country. They were traveling in the summer, leaving their homes and going forth. But those were two specific art colonies outside of Missouri that seemed to be, that our folks were really involved with.
You guys need a separate section on your website for art colonies. It's kind of fascinating.
So I have to ask you I'm sure the question that everybody asks you is, and each one of you, did you have a favorite or have you found a favorite?
I can jump in and answer that. I definitely was very intrigued by Christain, who was very embedded in Kansas City's local art scene here, and her husband was a sculptor. Now I can't think of his name, but they helped to establish Kansas City's Artist Coalition, the Mid-America Artists Association. She established the Unitarian Gallery here, which she was director of for 10 years. Just very involved. And what was really cool to realize when I was researching her is that she has these huge textile pieces around Missouri. And when I was an undergrad at UMKC going to Miller Nichols Library, I would walk on one of her pieces every day. And I always thought it was so beautiful and I never knew who did it. And so when I was researching her, I found out it was her. So I just felt very, it was just really cool. And I just loved kind of being able to uplift her a little bit in the research I did on her. So I enjoyed her a lot.
When we did the presentation and I got to see other people present, it was such an amazing discovery to see all of the other artists. So really, every time I learn something new, I become intrigued by that particular artist. So I don't know that I have a favorite. I think Roberta, you did I Love Marion Kibbe, is that right? And I thought her work was incredible, and her perspective and how she did overhead views. But each time I hear someone else, it's just unearthing all of this information. And I think the fact that we were able to include visuals for the profiles, and that was not part of the original plan. That was implemented after we had already started, and then they wanted to include images. It really raised the bar, and it just sparks your interest so much more in every single artist. So I'm continuing to explore and learn. And I mean, even if we did another behind the scenes presentation and did completely different artists, I would love that, because then I could learn about even more people that were in this.
What I think has been interesting about researching the artists is that you find out all these different things about their life and you know, things that happen to them and things like that. So I think that's been the interesting part. For our presentation, I talked about Kibbe, and I've always thought her work was interesting, and the fact she was here in Kansas City and so involved with the Art Institute and the Kansas City Society of Artists, and she was also involved with the Plaza Art Fair here in Kansas City. And I just finished researching an artist named Modesta Richardson, and she was active here in Kansas City. What I thought was interesting about her was that in her early career, the 30s and 40s, she wasn't included in the exhibitions because she didn't do that, because she was working these other jobs. But then later on, like in her 50s and 60s, is when she started exhibiting, which I thought was interesting. The most interesting part of me is I've been working here at the museum for 20 years. So people have come to us our most common reference question is, I have a painting, can you help me research it? So some of the names we've gotten for the database came from reference questions. So
Oh, wow.
finding more about these people has been really, really interesting, because I've been curious about like Modesta for years and Illa and all that. And I finally have a chance to dig into the newspapers and all this and find out some information. And the newspaper databases have been invaluable in finding information on some of the artists. Because if you can't find, you know, an ancestry, sometimes it's really hard to find things like their death date. But if you find their obituary, hey, you've got that piece of information. And sometimes it has all this other information in it, and it's like, it's been really interesting. So
I find it fascinating how you guys come up with these names, how you started, what got you started on it. So Roberta, that's fantastic. Sorry, Chris, did I interrupt you?
Oh, no, not at all. I've loved, I mean, John has done, I mean, I've done research and then I'm supervising. And so I've done little bits of lots. And one of my favorites artists has been Houston Chandler. And he was an African-American sculptor from Missouri that ended up went on to art school at the University of Iowa and got his MFA. And interesting thing was, it's just all these connections. In one of the newspaper articles, it was quoted that he had taken a summer course by Dr. H.W. Jansen. And I was like, who is W.H.? I was an art history major in college. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is Jansen's History of Art. And so he went on to write, I mean, just that, you know, you're one step away from someone else. But what I loved about, in a number of our artist files, we have survey questions, interviews, questionnaires that have been filled out years ago. And this is a questionnaire that had been filled out in the early 90s by Mr. Chandler. And it was really telling. And it was, you know, he was not allowed to join specific organizations because he was African-American in the 1940s. And your heart just dropped. But you know, it was documenting his memories, his experiences. So I felt connected in a sense to hear more about and learn about his story. And also he ended up going on to teach at Vashon. He was a track coach and changed a lot of lives at Vashon High School as well. So he was here in St. Louis. So it's just great. Each artist gives you a new window.
I also really enjoyed being able to pull things out of our archives at the Nelson, just for different artists. It was kind of serendipitous because I noticed that James Roth is an artist that's going to be contributed to Missouri Remembers, and I just processed a collection of his papers that we have. So I'm excited to be able to get, you know, that added to his record once it goes up. And then I know Roberta researched Rose O'Neill. I was so jealous that she got Rose O'Neill, that we have a collection of, our senior curator has a collection of papers of unrealized exhibitions at the Nelson-Atkins, and he was going to do one on Rose O'Neill. So I jumped in, there's a folder just full of like beautiful postcards and correspondence and like a little like notebook about her. So I immediately told Roberta, like, you have to use this. So I really enjoyed being able to pull out things in our own archives to, you know, apply to this.
Have you guys noticed, I mean, not only involvement in the project itself from the community, but has this spurred any new donations for your institutions where people say, oh my gosh, look, I have this great treasure trove of artists' manuscripts. Would you like to have them? Has any of that come forward from a collecting standpoint that you're willing to share?
Well, I think things are coming about. And I think also it's allowed us to then digitize portions of some of our existing archival collections. And then we'll be sharing those on Content DM here through the library, but we're trying to highlight some more of our archival collections that may have not gotten, you know, they've gotten brushed by. People didn't understand what People's Art Center was. So, and I think that will then create connection, and then we'll see where it goes from there. But yeah, we've heard from a few folks that are that have been working on catalog resumes for their family members who have been artists in Missouri, and we're just going step by step.
I know that often,
yeah.
no, go ahead.
No, trying to find, it's not always, if someone contacts you, you may not be the right repository. And in St. Louis, we have a lot of folks in town who have fabulous repositories. So you always want to find the right fit for the customer.
That's very true. Yeah. I know in my own experience, it seems like the more attention you bring to a collection, so we did one on, for Constitution Day, we did an exhibition recently on money. And I was surprised at how many people, when they were visiting the exhibit, came to me and said, oh, I have this collection of X, let me give it to you. So I just know that once you start to bring visibility to collections, oftentimes that could spur additional donation offers and just general interest. So I was curious on, and kind of would expect this as your project grows, that might actually, kind of help preserve additional artist stories that may still be in private hands. So.
I think in some ways that's what we're hoping to. I just realized that the project launched, the portal launched on September 20th. So now it has been a month. And so we have been promoting it, and it's been incredibly well received. I think that that's something that might happen over time. I imagine that that's completely something that people will enjoy doing, because people get so excited, especially when it's a family member. From the Art Institute standpoint, I think it's still a little early on, since it's only been a month. It has resulted in kind of, in a way, not in the reverse of that, but it has resulted in us enhancing our organization of our collection and in providing access to it. So it resulted in a great deal more of creation of finding aids and digitization of things that we upload then to archive.org, in order to ensure that there's access to the documentation that we were using for the project.
Hannah, I'm curious if you have any comments or questions from the student perspective.
I do actually. I was wondering pretty much is there a future of expansion into like earlier time periods, like past the 1820s? Or I guess before the 1820s in that stance?
I would say yes to that. We definitely want to dive into a deeper history and an earlier history before it was a state. And I'm not sure, I haven't had a chance to talk to Amelia about what they're looking into in order to add more artists. We are very focused on adding Native artists and people of color. I'm just not sure what the strategy is right now in order to contribute that to the portal.
And another one I had, you actually kind of led right into it, about has it been hard to kind of represent some of the artists of different, like Indigenous artists as well as like Native American artists? I noticed weren't included. So I was kind of wondering if it was harder to get exposure for them, or if there were good sources and documentation of those.
Well, I think that, we're going to have to learn that over time. The initial thrust of the project, when you're just starting out, you're just trying to get anyone that you can in the portal. And so we started here at the Art Institute with what information we have locally. And so what documents and what books we had on these people. And unfortunately, because of the way history was pre-1951, we did not have faculty that were people of color at the Art Institute, but that doesn't in any way imply that those people should not take priority in the portal and in being contributed to the portal. So seeing the portal so early on in the first year, the first month of its existence, it represents, more of what we initially had, and now we have an opportunity to expand on that and try to tap different communities in Missouri in order to contribute other people. And I know different people on this project could give their own perspective on that answer.
And one of my last questions, I guess, would be kind of, let's see, I have them all written down, sorry. there was kind of a statement about the investment of Missouri artists in the world. Is that kind of talking about their contributions during like the Civil War and the Jim Crow laws and civil rights? Are we kind of like with the, sorry, it made sense in my head, but like whenever we're talking about connectedness with the artist in Missouri to the rest of the world, are we talking about their contributions during these time periods?
I think, this is Chris. I think we've been able to, during the 1800s, it's more difficult to get information. I have not worked on a number of artists from that time frame that were active from, like, let's say the 1840s forward. The folks that I've been working on have been mainly involved, or let's say born late 1800s, and then were active before 1951. So I am not finding a lot of information or activity the Civil War era. I'm sure it's here because we had a number of different events and things happening during that time frame, but there's so much more yet to be uncovered.
I would say too, we were excited to include the timeline. I mean, the way I saw it was more of an opportunity to see how those time periods impacted our artists and not so much the other way around. And so it is interesting to see how much art was being created in the 1890s. So, you know, some years after the Civil War ended, so between the 1890s and 1920s, the timeline puts it into context to kind of show what was happening to these people when they were creating art. And there is a pause in the early 1940s where so many of them who would have been enrolled in college or teaching were actually overseas or in the Pacific because of World War II. So you can then see the way that the time period impacted the artists and their ability to learn or to create.
I see we have a few new people. Are there any further questions for our panelists today? Hannah, do you have any more?
I think my last question would probably ask, I'd probably have to ask, has contributions from universities and the community been extremely helpful, or are you still looking to kind of outreach more and gain exposure into the community in order to expand on artists that are lesser known?
I think the launch of the portal is a great opportunity for us to increase and enhance our outreach. So there's definitely a push for over the next years for the sustainability of the project to continue to do more outreach and to see what we can get. And we're hoping that the published portal can then be kind of a beacon for people to see, like, hey, here's an opportunity to contribute your information. So we see the portal as it is right now as just the beginning, as the very early stages, and that hopefully we can get as much diversity and as many more people into the portal as possible.
Well, I'll ask our panelists if they have any final thoughts they'd like to share with the group. I mean, it's been really wonderful having you here to learn a little bit more and get some candid discussion on the project and some of its anticipations for the future and things like that. So anyway, any last minute thoughts from any one of you? It's a word of wisdom to the rest of us if we want to embark on a project like this.
Any last thoughts? I'm not sure what, I don't have like a way to summarize things. I will say it's, you asked early on about COVID. And what's interesting is that this project, whether we had a pandemic or not, it actually was pretty remote because St. Louis, we had meetings every other week and we met online, and that would have happened whether COVID had been a factor in this or not. And we also used Google Drive to organize all of our folders and do all of that kind of communication. So I'm not totally sure what my point is, but I think for other projects like this, you are going to rely pretty heavily on a certain amount of remote work if you have people at other sites. And we've met over Zoom. I think it was Zoom this whole time, and it's just something that you have to adjust to, but we somehow made all of the file sharing and all of the online meetings, we made it work, and that's how the project was designed to begin with. So
yeah, I think that's definitely been the case with just sharing resources too, because I'm pretty much working from home most of the time right now. And just reaching out to each other and asking questions and sending each other scans of things and pictures of things. And even Roberta and I being both at the Nelson-Atkins, we're on opposite sides of the building, but I call on her a lot for materials in the library and, you know, try to help her from the archive. So it has just been very like a lot of distance communication and kind of trying to help each other out over email and things like that. So.
And our group really looks forward to our in-person meeting in 2022, hopefully. So it's been a fabulous group to work with. And we've just, even though we've had closures and, you know, the remote, just what Lora said, everything has been, this whole project's been enhanced by the remote capabilities. And then we're using Airtable for the back end. And so that's been really user-friendly. So it's been overall just a great experience. And this is just a product of having a great project manager at the helm. So it's been fabulous.
Sounds like you guys are having a really good time, and it's turned out well. I know one of the comments I had gotten in a previous session was, you know, kind of helping understand how COVID actually could benefit museums in the future. And this kind of shared project management and shared project initiative, I think can be enhanced and could be, you know, with all the technology now that we're all accustomed to using, this is really great to hear. So again, I want to thank Chris and Kristin and Roberta and Lora for joining us today. We have, this has been a fantastic conversation to learn a little bit more about the Missouri Artist Project. And so thank you guys for joining us. We'll probably put this up online to be shared with others so they can learn a little bit more about it. And otherwise, I hope everybody enjoys the remainder of the conference. We still have a few sessions today, and I hope to see you again soon. And for the four of you, good luck with the remainder of your project. I have no doubt this is going to last quite some time. Probably, I'm not sure it will ever have an end date. I feel like this research can probably go on forever. So anyway, thank you for your contributions. I was excited about this project from the moment I heard about it. And so it's been really an honor to hear a little bit more about it from the people so closely involved in it. So thank you.
Thank you for coordinating. This was fantastic.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye,
Have a
everyone.
good day.
Thank you.
Right. Bye.